Morning. You got a cup of coffee or tea in your hand? You ready to go? Okay, so I am the co-producer of AWE and also the founder of Wearables. This is the very first year that we have specifically created a track for wearable tech as well as a area of wearable technology in the expo hall. Wearables have always been a part of Augmented World Expo, of course, because smart glasses fall underneath the wearables category. But what we wanted to do, we being Ori and I, Ori is the founder of AWE, we really wanted to celebrate how important it is to bring AR, VR, and communities together, as well as to be able to show how these three technologies are actually all ingredients that lead up to one endpoint, which is the augmentation of the human experience. And I hope that you're starting to see how when you look at a wearable device and how it could be used with an augmented reality or virtual reality solution, we really take everything to the next level. And I think you're going to start to hear a lot of that here in this room today. So I wanted to start this morning off by just going through a couple of shifts that I'm seeing in this space. So I think I'm pretty new, actually, to wearable technology. I've only been writing and analyzing about it for the past 4.5, 5 years. I know a lot of folks that have been in this space a lot longer. I guess I'm just really loud on Twitter or something. I'm not quite sure exactly what happened, but I do have a lot of thoughts on the space. And even within that 4.5, 5-year time span, I've seen a lot of change, and I'm sure that you've seen change as well. And so I wanted to go through a lot of trends that I'm seeing, but really put these trends in context to how things have changed already within wearable technology. My slides are very simple, so you're going to have to focus on my outfit and my face today. So the first trend that I want to talk about is a growing sense of maturity within the wearable space. Now, the wearable space in general is not mature by any means, of course. There's a lot of growth that still needs to happen. But when Gartner published their annual hype cycle last year, it really struck me to see that wearable technology was positioned down the curve of the peak of inflated expectations, right on the cusp of the trough of disillusionment. And if you're familiar with the hype cycle, you know that this means that the hype is over and it's go time. And for the most part, when you hit the trough of disillusionment, it's a time where a lot of your users are expecting your device to work and add value, and that they really are going to be looking at value for their money. And from an investment perspective, your investors are looking for a way for them to find a return on their investment. And so really, the maturity, the sense of maturity struck me really hard when I went to CES this year and saw the wearable booths in CES were really focused on consumer purchase. And even in my conversations with a lot of the wearable companies today, a lot of the marketing dollars that used to be spent on awareness and education are now being earmarked for lifestyle magazines, not even tech magazines, in order to help them with adoption and traction from a purchase standpoint, if that's the space that you're playing in. So I think we're going to continue to see a lot of companies really taking a hard look at where their spend is, how their budget is doing. And this trough of disillusionment, it's a necessary part of all products' journey, but it's a really treacherous time. And we're going to see a lot of companies, a lot of startups either thrive or die within this space. And the rumor that recently came out, not even from a startup perspective, of Jawbone potentially tightening their own belts and no longer focusing on hardware for their own fitness tracker could be considered an example of this. Along that maturity trend, I think it's important to note that we are starting to see second and even third generation devices hit the market. And what does that mean? That means that you, as someone that goes into Best Buy and is purchasing the Microsoft Band 2, or the next generation of Misfit, or one of the various next generations of Fitbit, like the Fitbit Alta, or even the somewhat second gen of Apple Watch that came up with the refresh that came out recently, with every new generation that comes out, there's higher expectations that this device works, it's not buggy, but more importantly, there's a higher expectation in terms of the value that it delivers. And I think that this directly correlates back to where we are in that hype cycle with the trough of disillusionment. I know that in the virtual reality space, we had the DK1 and DK2. When it's a DK, a developer kit, when you get it home, well, number one, it's not really geared towards the consumer space. But even though it's available online, anybody can get it. But when you get a developer kit in your hands, you're more forgiving on the fact that it takes 3 hours to set up and has a ton of wires and a limited amount of applications. But when a consumer device hits the market, as it has already, and Oculus is a good example of this, then all eyes are on how well is it really delivering to its users? How is it going to change my life? How is it going to better my life? How is it going to entertain me? There's a lot of expectations on these next generation products. And I think we're going to continue to see more scrutiny in the wearable space as we move along. Perhaps tied to this as well is what I'm also seeing, a shift away from hardware and more a focus on data. And this is expressed in two ways. The first way are companies that I've seen that used to be hardware companies that are now shedding their hardware roots and becoming software-only companies, finding that their algorithms and their ability to derive insight from sensors is really where the gravy and the gold is. For some that have created sensors and products that are seeing success or that have those V1 or V2 devices out in the market, their focus is now less on trying to get the hardware up and running and out and manufactured, and more on creating applications and software, knowing that this data-infused software is going to deliver that value that I was talking about in the past two trends. So this shift away from focus on hardware, even in the media conversation, this shift away from it just being a smart ring or it being a smart bracelet or a wristband is starting to fade. And we're starting to really look at what exactly are these devices doing, and that lies within the software or the data layer. Related to this is this shift again that I'm seeing in devices that are more isolated or single use cases to embracing more of an ecosystem or interoperability mentality. And there still isn't a lot of convergence and interoperability happening right now, but we're starting to see these walls tear down. Fitbit is a really good example of a company that does one thing really well. It counts your steps, it takes care of your health, but arguably Fitbit isn't the most open of companies. And even right now, they still aren't like a Misfit, which is a little bit more of an opposite of Fitbit, opening their platform up to be able to be used in various ways. But their purchase of Coin Wearable payment system, to me, suggests that they know that just being a single-use device may not last very long, may not be the wisest strategy. And so even in the Fitbit world, I can see multiple use cases starting to be developed over the course of time, payment perhaps being one of them. Microsoft, for example, just made an announcement this week where they're opening up the Microsoft 10 platform to be used with non-Microsoft devices. And I know Carl Martin from NIMI was here yesterday on the stage, and the NIMI is an example of one of those devices that is now working with the Microsoft 10 platform. So you're starting to see how wearable companies are looking for partnerships and a way to grow an ecosystem, create an app ecosystem or a partnership ecosystem, which again furthers the value to you as a user. This one's a cool slide because for me, it's not an error. What I wanted to hit home with this shift is that for the most part, I would say the loudest trend in wearable technology is in fitness and health, and that includes sports. And that hasn't changed. The early adopters of wearable technology were professional athletes and amateur athletes that were hardcore runners and cyclists, and those continue to be, in my opinion, the biggest champions for this space. And in fact, this entire morning, you're going to hear some really great examples on how wearable technology is being used in the sports arena, and we're definitely seeing sports be disrupted by big data and wearables and sensors. And I think that we will see fitness and health be the dominant conversation for wearable technology. And when I mean wearable technology, because it's such a big umbrella, in this case, I'm meaning more the sensors that you wear on your body, less the screens that you're putting directly on your eyes. And we're even seeing within the non-professional sports or even amateur sports sphere a demand for these devices to take care of us. Really a lot more conversations and new solutions around epilepsy, autism, stories surfacing around wanting to have an Apple Watch be able to tell if you're having a heart attack or a heart murmur, even though we can question the validity of all that data. So as we move along, the growth within the space, I think we're going to continue to see this slide be the past equal the future. Now, we've heard a lot about fitness trackers as it relates to steps, and it definitely still is. And one of my predictions in January this year was that this would continue to be the year of the accelerometer and the step, and I stand by that. In the consumer sphere, still a lot of consumers don't have a wearable device on them. And counting their steps, which means that they are now more aware of their body, more present in their body, which is a huge shift. We forgot that we're biological machines that need to be taken care of. This shift, this focus back on ourselves is still huge, and the step is a friendly place to start. But what we are starting to see is as steps, at least in the industry, have been talked about for quite a lot, we're starting to see more of an emphasis on sleep in the way that the marketing strategies are being rolled out. Yesterday, we had Issy Goldwasser from Think, which is a wearable device that actually sends electrical stimulus into your body to make you either calm or energetic, talked about how the majority of his users use his device to be more calm in order to find themselves having a better slumber. And overall, we're seeing applications and devices really focusing on the value proposition of getting a better rest, now knowing that they've hit home the value proposition for the past 3 or 4 years, that you're able to monitor your activity. This is kind of one of my favorite things that's happening right now, just in general, and I think it's really important. And there's a lot of terms that are being thrown around. The Internet of Experiences, the empathic web, empathic computing, the emotional web. But really what's happening with wearable technology is that it's helping computing move from knowing who you are, so your demographic. Facebook knows generally who you are. Are you male? Are you female? What age are you? Where are you located? GPS really added to that. But it doesn't really know how you feel. You can tell it how you feel, but it's blind. It's blind to really know how you feel. If you look at what's happened on Facebook, for example, with the launch of their emoji, this is their way to try to figure this out. They're trying to know, how are you? But even that, there's too much of a gap between the technology for it to truly know who you are, and your bias is going to influence what you tell the rest of the world. Wearables really are a great truth serum on how you are really feeling. And so I'm starting to see, just like how we move from steps to sleep, I'm also starting to see the conversation shifting from information gathering to about who you are to data gathering about how you are or your emotions. And emotional or bioanalytic platforms and this term neuroscience is being thrown around like no tomorrow. And I think we're going to continue to hear a neuroscience-backed platform or something to that effect be a really driving force within why wearable technology is really important. So beyond helping us understand how we're feeling from a fitness and health perspective, the wearable space is going to be able to help the internet know how we're feeling and therefore contextualize the experience overall, whether that be your Facebook feed or whether that be the Google results or the Netflix recommendations that are coming up on your Apple app. When it comes to data, though, I think just like that hype cycle change, I'm gonna just like maybe the slide isn't entirely accurate because I was trying to be fun with the two Fs, but in the beginning with wearables was really new, and so the data was collected was all fine. There wasn't a lot of privacy concerns in general in the beginning, and there wasn't a lot of articles, at least in the media, scrutinizing to the degree that they are now the level of accuracy of the data. But I think this time is starting to be over. The fun factor is starting to fade, and now we're starting to see some of the fears arise. And that's to be expected as more and more people adopt these devices. And so, articles that we've seen in the news and just general conversation around the collection of data, but even more importantly, the accuracy of this data, especially as it relates to heart rate, is something that I think we're going to continue to see as wearables continue. We're also seeing in the expo floor, we're trying to illustrate this, we're seeing much more movement in the clothing space than in the previous years. So in the wearable arena for the past, I would say, 4 years or so, the focus has mostly been on gadgets that you put on your body, like wristbands or accessories like rings or earrings. There were few clothing players that brought wearable clothing to the table. But now, with advancements in smart textile manufacturing from companies like Myant, who's here from Toronto out on the expo floor, or Project Jacquard from Google, and their new announcement of partnering with Levi's to bring out a connected jacket, the trucker jacket, this fall. I'm definitely seeing that the floodgates are beginning to open, and we should start seeing more connected clothing enter the market than we have in the past. And then one of the final thoughts I wanted to point out is that in the beginning, 4 years ago, or even I guess just 2.5 years ago, the big news really was the smartwatch, and you couldn't open up The Verge or TechCrunch or turn on your TV and not hear about this new wrist screen, this tiny screen on your wrist, and how it could possibly take over your smartphone. And so the hype around the smartwatch was at its peak, last year, the year before, and what it's been replaced with now is the face screen or virtual reality. Again, maybe me being too cute on these slides, but basically that's kind of where it's at. So like when you look at where the hype is and where the headlines are in general with wearable technology, they've been less and less on the smartwatch, more and more on virtual reality. So virtual reality is the new golden child of wearable tech right now. But I think overall, this emphasis of the screen is what will remain consistent, and which kind of saddens me in a way because I'm really hopeful that wearable technology will continue to stress that we don't need to be so dependent on screens overall. But I guess as our relationship with technology has always been screen-based in some way, with the computer screen, our smartphone, we long for that next screen evolution. And so when we saw the smartwatch on our wrist, we said, we know this. It's a screen. What can we do with it? And I think that's why augmented reality and virtual reality are so easy to relate to, because they basically are screen-based technologies that we have some common ground with. With devices that are just sensors and no screen, with maybe haptic feedback or maybe no feedback whatsoever, we tend to scratch our heads to figure out why the heck we need it, because we're not used to that type of technology. But mark my words, there's a lot of value in that type of tech. So the last thing I want to mention before I get off the stage is that just as we saw a lot of the conversation shift from fitness trackers and smartwatches to now augmented reality and virtual reality, and mind you, I'm just talking about headlines and the bubbling up of conversation. None of these technologies are going away. I definitely see the next kind of wave of excitement move on to neurotechnology. And I think if you haven't already heard the term BCI or X-Tech or neurotech, Again, neuroscience, it's something that I think we're going to start to hear more and more of. And it does fall within this wearable tech umbrella category. But it's something that I think once we start to see AR and VR more commonplace in our lives will be the main focus for a couple years after. So that's it. I'm not quite sure if I have more time, or how am I doing on time? Oh, OK, so I'm done. So if you can come and find me if you have any questions. But I hope you enjoy the rest of the day. Some fantastic speakers in here, and I'll hand it back to Amanda.